We ask the same 5 questions every week, providing you with chewable bits of expertise. I'm your host, Katie McEwen, the procurement girl, representing BuyerQuest, the most user-friendly procurement solution in the world, an integrated Amazon business partner. Amazon business customers can now take advantage of procurement controls enabled by BuyerQuest. Check out buyerquest.com to learn more. I'm so excited to introduce y'all to our rockstar guest today, Lawrence. He has over 20 years of experience in procurement and supply chain. He's a senior leader at a Fortune 50 company, a leader in aerospace and defense. He's a top influencer in the space, a best-selling author, and a 6 Sourcing Supernova Hall of Fame member. Thank you for joining us on the show today, Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell us what you've been working on this year.
What happened? I've been working. So you mentioned I'm in aerospace and defense, and obviously not a great time to be in that industry. We have a global pandemic. Folks are not traveling very much, which means our customers are having some real challenges. And so most of what I've been doing has to do with affordability and liquidity. So I've been doing some very significant multi-billion-dollar RFXs. I say the X part because most of them are actually RFSs, but some are RFPs. And I'm really trying to optimize our environment and our supplier ecosystem so that we can get through this and be positioned for growth on the back end. So it has been lots of not sleeping, but really meaningful, interesting stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you've obviously seen a lot of success in this space. Who was that one person that strongly inspired your road to success? Does a certain mentor or coach come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate. I've actually had several. The very first mentoring thing that I ever had was I'm very introverted, which those of you who see me speak at conferences wouldn't know. But the reason you don't know that is because I used to go to work and I would work for 4 hours and I'd have lunch and eat at my desk because they didn't pay me very much. And then I work another 4 hours. And to me, it was great. I was getting 2 half days, right? And my lead came up to me, 4 or 5 months in and said, "Dude, you got to stop doing that." I'm like, "What?" And he says, "Hey, this is a relationship company. If you don't know people, you can't get stuff done. And so you need to start going to lunch with people and actually be social." And that was like the very first, in my 30 some odd years here, kind of mentoring kick, I'll call it. And I've had a lot of people that thankfully came up to me and said, "Dude, you got to stop doing that, or you got to start doing this or whatever." And the one who's really the most influential to me, I actually dedicated my leadership book to him. His name is Mike Luxembourg. And he was not only my mentor for probably about a decade or so. But he started when we were working together, and he actually continued after he retired for about 4 years, continuing to mentor me and just be a sounding board, and just a really phenomenal guy who is very much into I want to grow talent and help people and whatnot. And I've tried to pay that forward, all of my mentors, not just him, by actually doing a lot of mentoring and supporting other folks in our industry, both inside the company I work for as well as beyond that.
Oh, that's fantastic. What great advice for you to get out of your comfort zone and network and meet with other folks. And because that is truly how you grow. So that's awesome. That's great advice.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that you don't know if you don't know. Right. And so to me, I was thinking about how it breaks my day up, and, and I'm refreshed and relaxed and ready to do more and dive into the work. But what I didn't understand was that's not how stuff gets done. And every company's got a different culture, but you got to have a mentor who can help you understand that culture and how to succeed. And in fact, I actually always advocate that you have two. You have a technical mentor, so that's somebody that's really good in your space that you work in, and then kind of a business mentor, somebody who understands how your enterprise uses the space you work in to create products or services, drive revenue, whatever it is that's the business enablement, business value of your function. Because not everybody's in a line organization. You don't always create things that are sold or sell things, but everybody supports the enterprise doing it. And if you have those two mentors, you can understand how to do what you do better and understand how to further your enterprise better. It's a pretty good combination.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So before we move on to the next question, I'm curious. So when he recommended that you skip your private lunchtime and go out with other folks, did you immediately do it? Did you just kind of jump in with both feet, or did it take some time to get the courage up?
It took some arm twisting. I started like, I kind of made a compromise with those. I'll do 1 day a week. And then it became two, and then it became three, and then part of it was the whole like I couldn't afford to buy lunch every day, and so I felt kind of weird when a lot of people would go to a restaurant or go to the cafeteria or something. So that was part of it, but the biggest part of it was the excuse of I didn't like. Even today, I've got a small circle of really really close friends. I'm not good at socializing. And so when I speak at conferences, I have to psych myself up to do that. And now I've given the secret out, but normally people don't realize that I'm not good at that. It's just that I mean, I can do it, but it's not natural, and it's not I don't get a lot of energy from it. Some people, when they work the room, that's like their thing, and it builds the energy. For me, I go decompress afterwards and go read something or, watch a movie or whatever. Right. And
Yes, it
so,
takes all the energy.
yeah. And so it was something that was not my nature, but I fake it really, really well. And if I didn't fake it really, really well, I couldn't have gotten to where I am at all. I mean, that was like fundamental career advice that I needed to know. And, I'm just really glad that my lead's name we called him Yama. His last name was Yamashita, and I can't even remember his first name. It's been so long. But if he hadn't told me that, I guarantee you I wouldn't have lasted as long, and I wouldn't have climbed as high because I just didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's great advice for a lot of those introverts out there, that you're not going to climb as high as you probably think unless you have a good group of people around you that you're networking with. So that's great. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
what's the one innovative thing that you're seeing this year that's really taking the industry by storm?
There's quite a few, and one of the good things about the pandemic, right, is that the whole supply chain function has really come into prominence, right? Folks realize how important it is, and in that, innovation is becoming a really big deal. Silly story, but it's kind of cool. Through at the beginning of the lockdowns and whatnot, one of the only stores that didn't run out of toilet paper, the commercial, or excuse me, the whatever consumer type of toilet paper, is Trader Joe's. And it's not that they had a different supply chain than anybody else. It's that they got creative. One of their buyers called up one of the hotel chains and said, "Hey, we need this, and you guys don't have any customers. Let's make a deal." Right. And so innovation can be stuff like simply just thinking outside the box. And I love examples like that, because it really adds a lot of value. To sometimes we deal with contracts all the time and dotting I's and crossing T's, and we get really really narrowly focused, and we have to think bigger and more innovatively. One of the ways we do that I'm seeing a lot of companies doing, because there's so much critical procurement and supply chain work going on right now, is what I'm calling kind of the agile procurement. And it's not necessarily a specific thing. It's more using things like scaled agile, like we use in IT, in procurement, where you're doing things in sprints, you're working things more collaboratively with bidders, and just allowing ourselves to move faster. So, for example, I got an RFP out. Oh, it's actually a RFS in about 6 weeks. That's for about $1.2 billion worth of service. And, the team that put that together, we worked some really long days, don't get me wrong, but we did in 6 weeks what normally would take about 6 months. And the way we did that was we broke it into here's the statement of work for the things that are in the existing environment. Here's the statement of objectives for things that we need in the future, and creating a process so that we get the bidders what they need to do the right thing. And then we have a series of solutioning sessions where they come in and say, "Hey, we're thinking about," and we kind of put guide rails out. So help them understand how to sort of massage into, okay, here's my final bid. And the final bid will be something that'll add value and be differentiating, right?
Right.
And by doing it that way, instead of the typical "ye verily thou shalt," here's our statement of work, here's our SLAs, here's our terms, agree to everything and tell me your price. I think it allows us to go a lot faster and allows us to get, much better value from the supply chain. And I think gives them opportunities that they really have always wanted to do. And a lot of times the buy side hasn't let them. So I think things like that, and that's just one example in my own team, but I think most companies, at least I've talked to a lot of peers who are doing very similar things, right? We're not doing the old, what part of the customer's always right, do what I tell you to thing. We're being more innovative and more collaborative with our suppliers, which means we have to do procurement a little differently.
And you have to be willing to evolve like that to be successful. If COVID hasn't taught us anything, it's that we have to be flexible. That's great.
Yeah, totally. And the whole risk management thing is very different than what most folks think. Although I will say the company I work for was around in 1918, and we actually dusted off our business continuity plans from 1918 and looked at them and compared to what we have now. Not everybody gets to do that, but that is an advantage of companies been around for a long time.
Wow, fascinating. Oh, I can't imagine. I'd love to have an idea of what that looks like.
Well, the funny thing is, it's other than the technology, it's really not any different than what we're doing today. I mean, it was literally maybe 75% the same, which says if you got a darn good plan, you can dust it off. It's not like we've never had pandemics before, but we haven't had one that big, right? And so, it was very interesting with a global supply chain. What do you do if things get shut down, and how do you redirect things and all that? And most of that was already written. It was pretty cool.
Wow, I guess 1918, the world had seen a few things by that point. So yeah, that makes sense. So can you tell us one unique thing about you that maybe in your professional circle, people really wouldn't know about you?
I think people who know me well already know this, but people who don't. I did almost 50 years of martial arts, and a lot of my original books actually started in that space. I've done business ones, and like the Contract Professionals Playbook and things like that. But I started off in that space, and it's one of those things that really it really is beneficial, especially in this industry, because we do a lot of negotiations, a lot of high stress stuff, right? And so because of doing martial arts, and actually sort of implemented that working security part-time at a stadium, I've been in over 300 fights. I have been punched and kicked and actually stabbed and shot, which is I don't recommend that. But if somebody's, freaking out because you're getting heated language in negotiations, I just sit back, chill, going, well, he's not trying to kill me. So, I mean, I don't see why I get upset. Right. And so I can be calmer. Yeah. I can be calmer in a negotiation than a lot of folks because of that kind of mindset from the martial arts and from the experiences that I've had doing security and that sort of stuff. And it's amazing some of the similarities. I've done a lot of study of like Sun Tzu and Miyamoto Musashi and other folks like that, even written some books around those subjects. And you take some of those ancient sort of principles and apply them to business today, and you get the same fundamentals. And the same thing about the human behavior and interaction kind of stuff is, if you can bring the calm and you can be responding instead of reacting, you control the situation, which is really important in negotiations. And if you're getting in your head and you're getting emotional, then you're reacting and you've lost. And so, I find that to be a really valuable thing, even though it's not common. I mean, almost everybody I know took martial arts for at least a little while as a kid or something. I just never quit.
So what was your favorite practice in martial arts? What type of martial arts did you favor?
The one I did the longest is a form of karate called Goju-ryu, which means hard, gentle style or hard, soft style. And it was created by a guy named Chojun Miyagi. So if the Karate Kid, the Mr. Miyagi, that's where they got the idea from. And it's just it's really tied to, it's kind of funny. It's the same thing. There's an old saying that it's more important who you work for than what you do in terms of job satisfaction and all that. Same thing with martial arts. I just happen to find an instructor who's a really great dude, teaches to my learning style really well. Just really interesting. And so I stayed with that one, not because of the art so much, but because of the instructor. And it's the same thing, with my business career. I've had really awesome managers who allowed me to not stay in my box and to create and innovate and do unusual things. I mean, the job I have didn't exist until I created it. The organization I work in, I invented. You don't get to do that very often, right? And that was purely because I'm able to identify and solve unmet business needs and put together, kind of a real business case around why we need to do something differently. And I've always worked for people who listen when I do that. And so, same thing with the martial arts. I've had some that were, I bounced around between a whole bunch of different instructors that just, it wasn't a good fit. And when I found one that was, I was there for 22 years, I think, something like that. I finally got too old. I finally stopped 2 years ago, but I've been doing it for a long time.
But you're still keeping up with working out, right? Your son.
Oh yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. So for those who didn't have our pre-conversation, my son's a certified strength and conditioning coach and personal trainer, nutritionist, and he runs a fitness company. So I have to work out because A, it's great for my health, and B, I don't want him disappointed in me. So, I'm very diligent about that.
That's awesome. Well, you still got to make sure that he thinks daddy's proud. So yeah, that's great. So what's one piece of advice you'd give to folks that are trying to claw up the ranks and see some of the success that you've been able to see?
Well, I think part of it is, and I sort of mentioned it previously, part of it is working for somebody who lets you do your thing, right? Every company has room for improvement, right? And yet not every leader will let their employees kind of get outside the box a bit and try to solve those problems. I mean, I've been really fortunate, more than 30 years at the same company. And except for my first maybe 4.5 years or so, every role I've had was either created for me or by me. So I've had this really weird, unusual career, right? And the reason I've been able to do that is because I work for people who allowed me to do that. And when I find myself working for somebody who didn't allow me to do that, I went and found a new job. And so even though I've been with the same company for a lot of times, I've literally had 5 careers. And so, that's part of the thing is knowing that your next step is progressing you towards something as opposed to moving away from something, right? You always want to be moving forward. And you want to do it in an area that builds to your strengths and where you're going to learn something and do interesting and meaningful work. And more often than not, that's tied to who you work for, not what you do. I didn't think I was going to be, in sourcing and procurement. In fact, way back when I first started, I had 2 job options when I first started. I interviewed for a procurement agent role and I interviewed for a cost accounting role. And I actually took the cost accounting job, which was a disastrous, really bad decision. But I got better and I actually learned a lot from it. Because I thought, I was pretty detail oriented and kind of a numbers guy, but the work was not meaningful. It was just very uninteresting to me. And so I managed to be able to, even in that very first role, I was able to start doing things like I started working with cost policy and started doing disclosure statements and doing audits and things like that. So I was able to move beyond this just doing journal entries thing that I wanted to kill myself, frankly. I mean, I'm only joking a little, but one of the ladies I started with, she'd done 20 years, literally the same job 20 times, right? To me, it has to be 20 years of experience, not 1 year of experience 20 times. I just couldn't handle that. But because I worked for somebody who allowed me to do more, I'm getting my journal entries done. I'm making continuous improvement. So I got a little extra time in the day. Now I go over and talk to the folks in cost policy and they're like, hey, we have to come up with this disclosure statement for this new, thing we're doing with working with the government and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hey, I could help with that. That sounds like fun. That's more like what I learned in college. This journal entry stuff is like, ugh, right? Yeah. So, and by volunteering, improving what I did, freeing up some time, volunteering for more, I got tons of opportunities and kind of got this reputation for being the guy who could solve hard problems that nobody else could, which gave me more opportunities. And so that's really, when you boil it down, Never say no unless it's to a, supplier negotiations, right? Always negotiate deadlines. Don't say no to more, more responsibility, and work for somebody who lets you, grow in advance, right? It's however many years you're working, every year should be a new set of experiences so that you're adding more value for yourself and for your organization, and not doing the same thing over and over again. And that's, to me, regardless of your title or rank or role or whatever, interesting, meaningful work where you're learning stuff all the time. That's what's really cool. And the biggest thing about titles and rank and all that is it just tends to pay a little better.
This is true. This is true. That's great advice. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. And congratulations, Lawrence. God bless you. Thanks to everyone who joined Tenure Talks today. We stream live every Friday on LinkedIn and available anywhere you get your podcast. See y'all next Friday. Have a great weekend. Thanks again,
Thanks.
Lawrence.
Great talking with you, Katie.
It's great talking with you.